Hello and welcome to this presentation from Take Your Place. Take Your Place is an organisation helping people to understand their options and reach their potential. In this presentation, we are going to be exploring the types of jobs available in Peterborough and Cambridgeshire and looking at something called labour market information. So the world is changing fast. For you now, today's school students, 65% of the jobs that you're going to be doing when you finish school don't even exist yet. That's why it's really tricky when people say to you, what do you want to do? Because the job you end up doing might not even exist right now. So what we have to think about is what jobs are out there now, what jobs are evolving, which industries are growing quickly, and that's why we use labour market information. In this presentation, I'll probably refer to it as LMI more than I say labour market information, just because it's a bit quicker to say. Basically, LMI helps us to understand which areas of work are increasing and which are decreasing. And that, as a young person who's thinking about what they might want to do in the future, can be helpful because it gives you an idea of which areas your skills might fit into best and where you're most likely to be able to get a good job and a good career. And LMI is also, we can do it quite local, so we can look at Peterborough and Cambridge in particular, so that gives you an idea of what's happening in your local area. This information is Peterborough labour market information. What it's basically telling us is how many people live in Peterborough and how many of those people are economically active. Economically active just means that they are working, they are earning money. They might have their own business, they might be employed, but they are paying tax and they are contributing to the economy. We can also see how many people are economically inactive, and there can be several reasons for this. You might be a student, you might be looking after your family. There are reasons why people choose not to work and they are economically inactive. We can then see how many people are unemployed. These are people who could work, but at the moment are not employed. They may be claiming some benefits because they aren't working at the moment. We're quite lucky in Peterborough that actually unemployment is quite low and there is a good variety of jobs at different levels. So I mean different skill levels. So we have entry-level jobs right up to medium skills all the way up to professional high-skilled jobs, and in lots of different areas as well. We're just going to look at the key industries in Peterborough. It's worth knowing what the key industries are, because as a young person you can think, these are the things I enjoy doing, these are my skills. I don't really know what job it is I want yet, but if you know that the area that you want to work in is a growing area, then that will help you. Because if you think, yeah, I'm really interested in digital and creative things, and you know that that's a fast growing area in Peterborough, then you can think, yeah, that's all right, I'll carry on, and I know I'm probably likely to get a job. Obviously, there are other industries in Peterborough. You don't have to define yourself by these. These are just the top industries, ones that we know employ a lot of people and that are growing. So if we have a quick look, we've got advanced engineering and manufacturing. So that's making things, engineering, so making machinery, making things like tractors, making things like wind turbines. And actually there's over 100 manufacturing companies in Peterborough and they employ over 9,000 people. We have a quick look at agri-tech. Agri-tech basically just means farming, food production and food and drink. Again, it's a really big industry in Peterborough with about £4 billion coming through from agriculture, food and drink. And they also employ around 27,000 people. Some of the big employers in the area, which you may or may not have heard of, British Sugar, Nestle, McCain, Bakkavor, all places that are involved in food manufacture. The digital and creative industry is growing all the time, not just in Peterborough, although apparently Peterborough is the 6th most innovative city in the UK, but digital and creative is a huge industry and it is just growing all the time. Peterborough is the UK's first gigabit city, which is fibre internet, And apparently we have better speeds in Peterborough than lots of other places. So that really helps within the digital and creative industry. There are around 750 businesses, and ones you might have heard of is Bauer Media. They produce magazines. We'll talk about those in a bit. Looking at energy and environment, there are around 380 environmental enterprises in the city, and they employ around 6,000 people with a turnover, so that's how much money they're making, of around £600 million. And they look at things like water and wastewater, recycling, energy management. And again, Caterpillar Perkins are in there. They're doing some work with capturing CO2. And then we have Dresser-Rand, who you may not have heard of, who are making turbines and creating innovative products in sustainable heating. So things for the future, really. And lastly, we have financial services. So we have a lot of big businesses in this area, Barclays, RSI, Diligenta, and they employ around 27,000 people. And that's actually around 28% of the city's workforce. So a lot of people are involved in the financial industries. Then if we look over to Cambridgeshire, we have things like Cambridgeshire has a lot of life sciences and biotechnology. It's also big in software development and the gaming industry. There's a lot going on in Cambridgeshire, and it is literally just down the road. These are the largest employers in Peterborough. Some you will have heard of and some you will have not heard of. BGL I've mentioned before. They actually, if I said compare the meerkat, you would probably understand who I'm talking about. They're basically a very large insurance business, and they employ a lot of people in Peterborough in the call centre, but also in digital innovation. Coloplast provides medical equipment, things like stoma bags, so you may not have heard of them, but apparently they are in the top 100 employers in a recent Times poll. The Bauer Media Group produce all kinds of magazines, online and digital magazines, as well as paper magazines. We also have Ideal Shopping Direct. So that's basically a shopping channel, lots of craft, but the studios and the customer service and the warehouse are all in Peterborough. Perkins Engines is the one that most people think of when they think of big employers in Peterborough, and they are an engineering company. They do take on a lot of staff from Peterborough. They run apprenticeships, and they're quite well known in the area for nurturing their staff. Large employers in Cambridgeshire, AstraZeneca, which is a pharmaceuticals company. And again, like we said, life sciences is big in Cambridgeshire, and that means all those things, biotech. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, Cambridgeshire is at the front of, the cutting edge of some of the research. During the coronavirus, Cambridge has been on the telly quite a lot because the research that's going on, a lot of it is being dealt with through companies that are in Cambridge. Marshalls of Cambridge, you may have heard of. They do air and defence. We have the Hilton Food Group and G's Group Holdings, which are both food production and manufacture. And BGL gets in there as well because Peterborough and Cambridgeshire are sort of linked together, and BGL is such a big company that it employs a lot of people in the area. If you've never heard of any of these companies, then you might want to have a look into them. And when you look at something like food and farming, they may not be things that interest you, but if you're interested in science, if you're interested in working with people, there could be jobs there that are actually really interesting to you. And it's also a fast moving industry. Producing food and getting food out through the supply chains is a huge job, especially during things that have happened recently like coronavirus, where we've had shortages of certain foods and people have had to work behind the scenes to make sure that the supply chain can keep going. Perhaps the idea of running your own business is appealing to you. Lots of people would like to be their own boss, and actually we can see that a lot of businesses do start in Peterborough each year. Unfortunately, businesses also fail, but there is a distinct entrepreneurial spirit in the city of Peterborough that stimulates a high volume of startups each year. Now that's taken from a report by Opportunity Peterborough about what's happening in Peterborough. And basically that just means that there are a lot of people in Peterborough who are trying to make it, who are starting new businesses and new ventures. Some of these will be successful and others won't. But there are a lot of support out there for people who want to start their own business, especially if you can spot a gap in the market, or you can spot a way to support an industry that is a big industry in the area, but they haven't got a particular thing at the moment. We get a lot of people, although I've told you about some of the big companies, for all of those big companies, there will be 10 to 20 smaller companies who are relying on that big company, who sell to them, who provide services to them, and it's all linked. So that's why it's useful to know which industries are big in your area. Even if you don't directly work in that industry, you might work in something that is related. As I said, Peterborough has a lot of new businesses start up, and these are the breakthrough innovators that were recognised in the recent Opportunity Peterborough report. So you have Peterborough Reuse, where they are repurposing Hessian coffee sacks into new saleable products. Solar Polar, which is a clean tech startup, and they specialise in solar thermal cooling and heating so that they're not having to use electricity or any other fossil fuels. We have ABAX, which you'll be aware of if you've ever been to the Posh Stadium because it's sponsored by ABAX. It's a market leader in delivering GPS tracking and fleet management. Then we have some other ones. Marmalade is the one that is an insurance company for young people, helping them to buy cars and get insurance because actually that can be a very expensive thing for young people. Bradshaw Electric Vehicles and DNVGL, which is already a global giant, and then they have a large technical assurance company, and they work in the oil and gas industries. So there's always things going on. There is always new businesses coming through, new advances in technology. And you as young people now will be working in these industries that are new and emerging. The environment is a big industry. Looking after people is a big industry. In fact, these are some of the jobs of the future. Cybersecurity expert, software developer, big data analyst, online merchandiser. These are just some of the digital kind of careers that are new and emerging and will be in demand in the next 10, 20 years. Think about online merchandiser, for example. Basically, that's just your online shopping. How many of us during coronavirus had to go and do our shopping online? Making it a pleasurable experience, making it an easy experience to shop online, that's the job of the online merchandiser. The other thing that the internet creates is a lot of data. And analysing this data and getting the data to work for you is a huge job and an emerging job. We all know that we look for something on the internet, you put a search in, and then the next time you go on, you get a little pop-up that's related to the search you did. People have analysed it. That's all about analysing data, working things out, spotting trends, and that helps businesses to grow. Software developer, as I said, in Peterborough, there was a shortage. BGL couldn't get the skills that they needed and they had to look elsewhere. Epidemiologist, that's a huge one. Right now, you've probably seen them on the news because of coronavirus, but even before this outbreak, it was a top 10 job and a job of the future. Nurse, care workers, we're always going to need them. We've got an ageing population. Food technologists. Now, as we said, Peterborough is big in the food industry, but actually there are problems with the supply that we have, with the environment, with changes in the weather. So food technologists are looking at new ways of making food. So 10, 20 years ago, you couldn't get a vegan burger that tasted like a meat burger. That's a new thing. They've been developed by food technologists. The next thing that food technologists are looking at is things like making flour out of locusts, because they can be grown in a lab and they can be created and it's easier than growing a crop. Pilot is a big one. The more we use air travel, the more pilots we need. Incidentally, pilot is one of the highest paid jobs in the UK as well. Teacher. We're always going to need teachers. The way that we get taught and the way people are teaching us may change in the future. We've all experienced online learning now. This may be something that becomes more and more prevalent as we go through. Accountant is always a big one. People need to be looking after their money. Big companies need to be held to account for what they use their money for. And as long as they've got clear accounts to show where the money has come from and where it's gone, then we can show that they are a responsible company, and the company also knows if they're making a profit. That's what accountants do. Engineer. Well, it's not just any old engineer. There are so many different types of engineering, and that has just exploded over the past 10 or so years. And again, it is a growth area. So if you're into science, if you're into those kind of technological areas, then an engineer could be something that you go into, and you'll find jobs in so many different areas. As well as jobs of the future, the most important thing is to think about your skills. What skills do we need in the future? Well, it's probably things you've heard about in school, things like complex problem solving. When you're doing maths, when you're doing a science experiment, when you're trying to organise events, you're doing some complex problem solving. Critical thinking. When you have a debate and you're trying to work out, is that right? Is that wrong? Thinking about things in a different way. Creativity. And creativity used to be at the bottom of this list 10 years ago, and it's crept all the way up to 3. And that's because it's becoming more and more important. One thing that people fear is that digitalization, the use of using robots and things like that, will mean that they lose jobs. We've already seen huge factories that used to employ hundreds of people now only need a handful of people because everything has become automated. So you need to find a job that the robots can't do. Creativity is something robots can't do. We can use computers, we can use technology to help us be creative and to create things, but technology on its own can't be creative. People management, coordinating with others, emotional intelligence, all these kind of soft skills that we could talk about, all things that you're learning every day when you're at school, when you're working with people, these are all important skills for the future. And sometimes it's better to think about, what skills have I got? What am I good at? I like talking to people. I like using a computer. Thinking about those things, thinking where your strengths are and thinking about what you enjoy doing is better than thinking, what do I want to be in the future? Thinking about what you enjoy, thinking about what you're good at, that could lead you on to the type of career you want. You don't need to make decisions while you're at school about what career you want in the future. If you've got a good idea of what kind of thing you want to do, then that will help you so that you can choose the right subjects and think about gaining skills in the area you want to go into. But don't worry if you don't know exactly what you want to do just yet. If you do know what you want to do, that's great. Do some more research, use LMI, work out if it's wanted in the area that you live in. Is there a skill shortage in a particular area that you want to go in? Think about all these things and just think about what is out there and where your place might be when you get out there. One good website, I mean, there are lots. You can search for labour market information, but a good website to have a look at is I Could. You can explore lots of careers, you can take the buzz quiz, and what's really nice about I Could is they have lots of videos of people talking about their jobs, and they're kind of unusual jobs that you've probably never heard of. So that's why it's nice to have a look on that website. If you've got any questions about what we've talked about today about labour market information, or you've just got some questions about a career that you want to do in the future, you're thinking about going to university, you weren't thinking about a degree apprenticeship, whatever it is, you can get in touch with us. We've got a website, takeyourplace.ac.uk, and there's loads of really useful resources on there, so I would have a look at that. You can email us directly, cams@takeyourplace.ac.uk. You can also find us on Facebook, on Instagram and Twitter. Thank you for listening, and I hope you've enjoyed this presentation about labour market information.